everyone, my name is Danica and welcome to Something Like a Star. I finally got around to counting all of the books I have in my closet and all the ones that are packed up. I think I'm still missing at least one box somewhere, but it can't be a huge box. I think it's just my comic book. But I now have a mostly grand total of how many books I own. I have so many books. And there are more in the mail. I just won a Goodreads giveaway this morning. A book outlet sent me a $5 voucher, so I bought some books from there that are on the way. My book depository box just shipped, and so I have a lot of books coming as well. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about my June wrap-up and my July TBR. Grand total in June, I read 7 books. I read 1 book during the first 2 weeks, and then I read 6 books during the last 2 weeks. So it was a second half heavy month. The first half I had a lot of stuff going on in my personal life as well as at work, and it just didn't work out so I could read as much as I wanted to. But I'm hoping in July, now that everything's settled down, I'll be able to double that score, especially with all these new books coming in. I've got to read faster. The first book that I finished in June was Nocturnes by John Connolly. I talked about this book in my May wrap-up in June TBR because I was already reading it, but I did finally finish it. It was a reread for me, so it's one that I really do enjoy. John Connolly is an author that I've read his fiction kind of gothic horror stories, but I haven't really read his Charlie Parker detective stories. I own 2 of them, but they're like number 9 and 10, so I hate jumping into the middle of a series. Maybe eventually I'll get around to them, but definitely this is one of my favorite works by him. It's a book of short stories, like I previously mentioned, and it deals with everything from missing children to supernatural demons and caves. And vampires. My favorite story in here is about a vampire named Miss Froome. And it's just a really fun, enjoyable read. It is a little bit thicker. It took me a little bit longer to get to, but I like books of short stories because I can read them a story or 2 a night, and I get through them fairly quickly. Some of the stories in this one are a little bit longer. There's one that's about 75 pages and one that's about 150 pages. Those 2 are basically short novellas, but for the vast majority of the book, they're about 15 to 20 page stories, and I just think they're really easily digestible as before bed, bite-sized kind of stories. Because it is a horror book, maybe before bed isn't your thing, but they're good to read over breakfast as well, a good length for that. The next book that I read was The Quickening by Lyda Angelis. And I have to confess that I was really disappointed with this novel. I had pretty high expectations. It deals with a woman who is sort of stuck in her middle-age, upper-class, moneyed life and doesn't like it and wants to get out and explore and falls in with a group of travelers. And it's got some magical realism going on. You've got the Fae, the travelers and the Fae and the fairies, and the one thing this book has going for it is its villain. The villain is incredibly intense and incredibly creepy. It's a gentleman who uses religion to his advantage and becomes sort of a cult preacher, and then through his influence as a cult preacher influences his people to attack these groups of travelers and others he sees as different with hate crimes and violence, and the whole book is trying to resolve this. But by and large, I just felt like the plot wasn't very well developed, the characters weren't very well developed, everything was sort of a half their idea, and if it was something that was maybe given 50 more pages and a little bit extra prose to connect the ideas, I might have enjoyed it more. The next 3 books I've already done a review talking about, but I did read Maggie Stiefvater's The Raven Cycle this month, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I have a review video, so I'll link that down below if you want to check it out. I did actually end up getting to Slaughterhouse V by Kurt Vonnegut this month. I chose it over some of the other TBRs for this month just because I was really in the mood for something a little bit more contemporary after reading The Raven Boys. I loved The Raven Cycle a lot, and I look forward to reading more YA in the coming weeks, but usually afterwards I need to read something small and contemporary just to help me through, and this is what I've been trying to read for a while. My favorite quote is in this book, and I like it just as much in context as I did out of context. So if you haven't read any Kurt Vonnegut before, this is a pretty good one. I think I still prefer The Sirens of Titan as my top Vonnegut book, but this was a pretty good one. It follows a gentleman who is writing a book, and within this book he's telling the story of World War II and being a prisoner of war towards the very end of the war and being in Dresden when all the bombings happened. It is a satire, it's a strongly anti-war book, and it was a really good read. Next, I read The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley. I talked about this book a little bit in my library book sale haul. It's essentially a mystery novel. It follows 11-year-old Flavia DeLuce, who is an aspiring chemist and sort of a busybody, gets into everybody's business and annoys the heck out of her sisters. But because she's a child, gets away with a lot that maybe an adult investigator would not. This novel follows the mystery of a dead bird and a postage stamp and a dying man in her garden and how they all connect, and the whole time she's trying to keep her father from being framed for murder. I enjoyed it, but I only gave it 3 stars on Goodreads. I felt like the book was much more developed in the second half than it was the first half, and I also feel that Flavia as a character came on too strong at first. She's too strongly written as hyper smart, and it just didn't feel believable. That said, about halfway through, it did get better, and I enjoyed the story of the mystery itself, so I did give it 3 stars on Goodreads. The final book I read this month is Things Hoped For by Andrew Clements. I am still reading this one. I did just begin, but by the time this video goes live, I expect to have finished. It's 167 pages long, so it shouldn't take me super long to read. The words are pretty well spread out on the page, and it's very much a middle grade book, but I read the first one in May, and this is one that I've been looking forward to. I don't know anything about it really because I did just start, but you'll get my thoughts on this one in July. Speaking of July, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I have a lot of books coming in. I was a little bit bad. I had sort of a rough month in my personal life, and when I have rough months, I therapy shop. So I have 7 books on the way this month, and all of them I'm looking forward to reading relatively quickly. So I don't want to have a huge TBR pile of the books I've currently got. That said, there are a few that I have been looking forward to eagerly, some for over a year. The first is this book that I picked up at the library book sale haul. It is the Dragon Harper book. It's in this world of Pern, created by Anne McCaffrey, but it's actually written by Jody Lynn Nye. It seems like it's a standalone, even though it's written in this world, and it's just a good introduction for me to get back into Pern because it's a world that I really, really enjoyed when I was a kid, and I would love to revisit. The next book I plan on tackling this month is The Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan. This is the second book in the Percy Jackson series, obviously, and it's a series that I, for some reason, didn't want to read when I was younger. I think somebody that I knew at school liked it, and I didn't like that person, so I took that as a negative recommendation for this book, which was a huge mistake. I really enjoyed the first one when I read it in April, so I'm looking forward to getting further through the series. In addition, Books A Million is doing a fun prize thing where you completely read 4 of these, have a parent or guardian sign off on it, and you can go in and get a free Camp Half-Blood tote. So I'm getting through the series finally, and I might get a free tote out of it, which is exciting. The final book on my TBR for July is The Prodigal Summer by Barbara Kingsolver. I do have several Barbara Kingsolver novels. I've only read one of them. It is one of my all-time favorite novels and one of the most influential novels to me, so I'm looking forward to reading more of her writing. And this book specifically has summertime in the title. It's a very green novel. The book itself is green, and it's got this really fun book pages here at the beginning. And to the end, it's very similar. And so it's just a book that I've been wanting to read in the summertime and didn't get around to it last summer. And so I'm looking forward to tackling it in July. So there you have it. In July, I'm hoping to read between 8 and 12 books. I don't know if I'll actually get around to it, but that's my goal. I do have a TBR pile that's pretty extensive. Of those 447 books that I've got, I've probably only really read about 2/3 of them. So I've got at least 120 books in my closet in boxes next to me that I've never read, and I'm really trying to get through that. Today's song of the day is a cover of What Does the Fox Say by Michael Schultz. I know the song is really silly, but you've got to give this cover a chance. It's an acoustic cover. It's stunning. It's one of my all-time favorite covers. I'll link it right over here just like I usually do, so you should definitely go check it out. Thank you all so much for watching. You're each and every one of you great, and I'll see you next week.